welcome you. You've given us a really fascinating set of materials this time, really digging into how big data, massive amounts of data, and real-world evidence are shaking things up in healthcare decision-making, especially, around new drugs.
Absolutely. Yeah, our mission for this deep dive is, well, to pull out the key insights from all that material you sent over. We're seeing this fundamental shift, really, in understanding drug effectiveness and safety, moving beyond those very controlled clinical trials.
Right, looking at what happens sort of on the ground in everyday practice.
Exactly. So we'll look at where this real world data comes from, the powerful analytic tools needed, and yeah, some concrete examples of the impact.
What struck me looking through this was just the sheer scale of it all, the volume and the variety of data we have now. It paints a much richer picture, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a whole new level of detail compared to what we had before.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the basics then. When we say real-world evidence, RWE, what are we actually talking about?
Okay, so simply put, RWE is the clinical evidence, about the usage and potential benefits or risks of a medical product, derived from analysis of real-world data, RWD.
And that RWD is collected from actual patient experiences, out in the wild, so to speak.
Precisely. Not in the artificial setting of a randomized controlled trial, or RCT. That's the key difference.
Right, because RCTs, while they're the gold standard for proving efficacy initially, they have really strict rules, don't they? Who can be in the trial, who can't.
Exactly. Strict inclusion and exclusion criteria, which means the people in the trial might not perfectly represent the broader patient population you see in clinics every day. Those patients often have multiple conditions or are taking other meds.
Yeah, real life is messy.
Right.
Not like a neat study protocol.
Uh-huh. And that's where big data analytics really becomes crucial. We finally have the computational power, the tools to actually process and make sense of these huge, complex data sets from the real world.
So it's not just having the data mountain, it's having the tools to mine it for insights.
That's it, exactly. Imagine like a million-piece jigsaw puzzle. Before, we could maybe only look at small sections. Now, big data analytics, often using things like AI, lets us see the bigger picture, find subtle patterns, connections we'd completely miss otherwise.
Okay, that makes sense. Finding the signal in the noise, basically.
Yeah. It gives us a much, much deeper understanding of drug performance, safety profiles across really diverse groups of people.
All right, so where does all this real-world data, the RWD, actually come from? Sounds like it's pulled from many places.
It is, yeah. Think about all the digital breadcrumbs from healthcare interactions. Electronic health records, EHRs, are a massive source. Your doctor's digital notes, diagnoses, lab results,
Okay,
prescriptions.
the records kept by hospitals and clinics. Got it.
Then there's claims and billing data
Right.
from insurance companies, payers.
Hmm.
That tells you a lot about which treatments people are actually getting, how often the costs involved. It paints a picture of healthcare utilization.
Right, patterns of care. What else?
Increasingly, patient-generated health data. This is huge. Stuff from wearables, fitness trackers, sleep monitors. Also, data patients enter themselves into health apps or patient surveys.
Huh. So individuals are directly contributing their own data points? That adds another layer.
A really important one. And we also have disease registries. These are focused databases collecting specific information on patients with a particular condition, maybe cystic fibrosis or a type of cancer. Great for long-term tracking.
So really targeted data sets for specific diseases.
Yeah. And finally, don't forget pharmacovigilance data. These are the adverse event report side effects that doctors, patients, or companies report after a drug is on the market.
Wow. Okay, so from your smartwatch to insurance claims to a side effect report,
Yeah.
it's quite a mix. And all this feeds into generating that real-world evidence.
Exactly. It all comes together, gets analyzed, and hopefully gives us that more complete picture. And this RWE is now being actively used to inform some really critical decisions.
Okay, let's get into that. How is it being applied? Where are we seeing the impact?
Well, one major area is regulation. Bodies like the FDA, they're increasingly looking at and using RWE, especially for post-market surveillance.
Monitoring drugs after they're approved.
Precisely. Understanding long-term safety, seeing how effective a drug really is once millions are using it, not just the few thousand in a trial. It can help spot rare side effects that didn't show up earlier.
That seems incredibly important for public health.
It is. And RWE can also help understand how well a drug works in specific subgroups, maybe older patients or those with kidney problems who might have been excluded from trials. Sometimes it can even support expanding a drug's approved use, its label, based on compelling real-world data.
So potentially speeding up access to treatments for different
Yeah.
patient groups. What about actual healthcare delivery? How doctors treat patients day to day?
Yeah, RWE is starting to inform clinical practice guidelines, helping guide doctors on the best treatment pathways based on broader evidence, and it's a big driver for personalized medicine.
How so?
Well, imagine using insights from RWE to tailor a treatment choice for your specific patient based on observing outcomes in thousands of similar real-world patients, similar age, similar other conditions.
Right. Moving beyond just the average trial result to what works for this type of person.
Exactly. The ultimate aim is always improving patient outcomes, making care more effective and potentially more efficient too.
Okay. And you mentioned drug development itself as a key area being changed by this. How is RWE fitting into that pipeline?
It's touching multiple stages. Right at the beginning, RWE can help with identifying and validating new drug targets.
How does that work?
By analyzing real-world data on disease progression, unmet needs, how existing treatments are performing or failing, researchers can get clues about which biological pathways or molecules are truly driving the disease in actual patients, making them potentially better targets for new therapies.
So it grounds the lab work in the reality of the disease in populations.
Yeah, kind of. Think about cancer drug discovery shifting towards specific molecular targets. RWE helps confirm which targets are most relevant across diverse patient groups.
Interesting. What about clinical trials themselves? Can RWE make those better?
Definitely. It can help optimize trial design. For instance, using RWD to better identify the right patients to enroll those most likely to respond, or those with the highest unmet need. This can make trials more efficient, maybe smaller or faster.
Okay. Refining the recruitment.
And there's a lot of buzz around using RWE to create external control arms.
External controls, what are those?
So instead of having a placebo group within your current trial, especially maybe for rare diseases or certain cancers where placebos are tough ethically, you might use historical RWD from similar patients treated previously with the standard of care as your comparison group.
Using past data as the benchmark instead of a concurrent placebo group.
Exactly. It's complex, needs careful statistical handling, but it holds promise for accelerating development in some areas.
I can see how that would be useful.
And then, of course, there's the massive role RWE plays in post-market surveillance, which we touched on. Monitoring safety and effectiveness continuously once a drug is launched. Detecting rare events, understanding real-world usage patterns. It's vital.
It really creates this continuous learning loop, doesn't it? Feeding insights back into practice and future development.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, handling all this data, it's not trivial.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Analyzing these massive, messy data sets must need some serious tech.
It definitely does. You need sophisticated analytic platforms. These systems have to integrate data from all those different sources we mentioned, EHRs, claims, wearables, clean it, standardize it, which is a huge task in itself, and then apply advanced analytical methods.
Not something you can do in Excel.
Not even close. We're talking techniques like machine learning, AI. They're becoming essential tools to sift through the complexity, identify those subtle patterns, predict outcomes, things humans just couldn't do at this scale.
So AI is becoming the engine to unlock the value in the RWD.
In many ways, yes, but it's also crucial to be aware of potential biases in RWD. It's not perfectly curated like trial data. So the analytical methods have to be incredibly rigorous to ensure the evidence, the RWE we generate, is actually valid and reliable. Garbage in, garbage out still applies.
Right, the quality of the analysis is paramount. Now, our outline mentioned connecting this to some concepts like process analytical technology, PA, for manufacturing. How do those worlds link up?
That's a really interesting parallel, actually. While the source materials didn't give us direct RWE clinical outcomes linked to PATE, the underlying philosophy is very similar. It's all about using data for better control and understanding.
Okay, explain that link.
Well, think about PATE in drug manufacturing. We talked about using real-time sensors and data analysis during production to monitor critical quality attributes, ensuring the process stays within spec, making adjustments on the fly. It's continuous monitoring for quality control.
Right, data-driven manufacturing.
Now think about RWE. It's essentially continuous monitoring for drug performance after manufacturing out in the real world. We're using real-world data streams to track safety and effectiveness on an ongoing basis. So just like PETNI monitors the process, RWE monitors the product's impact in practice.
Ah, I see. So it's analogous continuous data streams for continuous understanding just at different stages of the drug life cycle.
Exactly. One focuses on making the drug consistently well, the other on understanding how the well-made drug performs in diverse people over time. Both rely heavily on collecting and intelligently analyzing data streams.
That's a neat connection. What about the idea of scaling up?
Yeah, remember discussing things like using lab tools to predict how drug particles might behave when you scale up production from a small batch to a huge one?
Predicting performance at scale.
RWE is kind of doing the same thing, but for patients. Clinical trials are like the small lab batch, a limited, controlled population. RWE tries to understand and predict how the drug will perform when scaled up to the entire diverse real-world patient population. It's about understanding performance beyond the initial controlled setting.
Okay, predicting real-world performance based on initial signals, analogous to predicting manufacturing performance. That makes a lot of sense.
It does. The core idea is using data proactively, either to ensure manufacturing quality or to understand and optimize patient outcomes.
Okay, so wrapping things up. It feels like the key takeaway is that big data analytics is genuinely transforming our ability to generate and use real-world evidence.
Without a doubt, it's providing a much more comprehensive, nuanced understanding of how medicines actually work and don't work outside the confines of traditional trials.
And this RWE isn't just academic. It's directly influencing major decisions, regulatory pathways, clinical guidelines, how we even design the next generation of drugs.
Correct. We're definitely uncovering new aha moments as we get better at tapping into this wealth of real-world experience data.
It's pretty powerful stuff. So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. Just consider how all the health data points generated about you, maybe from doctor visits, prescriptions, perhaps even your fitness app, might be contributing, anonymously, of course, to this bigger picture. How this collective data could shape more personalized medicine in the future, and how new treatments get developed and watched over time.
Yeah, and, what are the ethical considerations there? As more and more personal health information gets used for RWE, it's definitely something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.